Okay. Hey, everybody. We are live now. I'm going to give people a few minutes to join. We are currently live. I don't know where you're watching me from, if you're watching on replay, but we are streaming to Financial Literacy for Women Business Owners Facebook group. If you're not in it, you need to come join. I'm also streaming to my Balance CFO Facebook page and on YouTube, on my YouTube channel as well. And today I like to always give the date because things are moving so fast right now. So we need to be aware of what the date is today. So today is Wednesday, April 29th. So if you're watching this later, make sure you're keeping up with any updates that may be coming out. But I just want to make sure everybody knows the date as well, because this stuff is, it's like almost minute by minute, we're having new developments and things happen. But we want to talk to where we are right now. And you guys have had so many questions. I see people joining. So if you join, say hey so that I know you're here and I can make sure I can see your comments. We have had so many questions though. You know, I'm a CPA, I'm a numbers girl. I could talk to you guys about these loans and I can talk to you about even unemployment to a certain degree. But I've gotten a lot of questions lately that are really legal in nature. And I always have to be a little careful. Of course, not a lawyer, hashtag not a lawyer. I can answer them to some degree for what I do know and understand, but it's important that I'm not giving you guys legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I don't follow that world as closely. So because of that, Amy, who's one of my preferred vendors, Amy Tepper, she had volunteered to come on here and answer y'all's questions, which I am impressed that she wants to come do that because I know you guys have a lot of them and I see you guys continuing to join. So that's great. So we're going to go over a couple of things to start that we know that I've seen questions on repeatedly in the Facebook group that you guys have. So we're going to talk about those things first, and then we're going to start taking your questions. But if you want to start writing your questions, I'll go back and kind of circle back to them as many as, and we'll do as many as we can in the time that we have. Okay. Hey, Kelly. Hey, Beth. Good morning, guys. Okay, awesome. So let's jump on in as we're waiting for people to continue to join. But I want to talk to you, Amy. Well, you know what? First, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself first. So tell us who you are, what you do, all the things.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Amy Tepper. I'm a practicing attorney. I have been doing this for 19 years now. Every year that goes by, I can't believe it. I am based out of the Chicago area and have been practicing here for 19 years. Started my own law practice about 5 years ago, decided to go out on my own. And that's been great. And so we, at our firm, we are women owned and women run, and we employ stay-at-home moms, and we work remotely to make sure that attorneys who want to use their JD have the opportunity to use it on a truly flex time basis with all of the other responsibilities that women and moms have. I felt that that was always really important and never really available to me. So I wanted to make that available to other attorneys as well. So we work entirely remotely. That helps keep our overhead costs down. And we work really exclusively with small business owners, which I love. Entrepreneurs, startups, people that already have a team of folks, employees. So really all along that spectrum, but really focused on all of the business needs of small business people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I do think, every business, I think it's good to have somebody like a CPA or an accountant that you can go to for that advice, and also a small business lawyer. I think that's a good team, right? Yes. Because there's sort of different things. There's a little bit of overlap in what we do, but our expertises are totally different. So it's good to kind of get the legal side and, the accounting tax side as well whenever you're trying to make decisions in your business. So
right.
Amy and I connected a while ago. I can't even remember how or when or any of the specifics around it, but we were like, hey, we would be good. This is a good match. So Amy is one of my preferred vendors, one of my small business lawyers that I recommend that people use. And we'll talk about at the end of this how you can find Amy if you're looking for any of her services. So let's jump on into what the big questions are. So I know what some people have been asking. So I'm going to start with that, and then we will go from there. So the first question I keep hearing a lot about right now, right? A lot of people are maybe starting to reopen or might be thinking about reopening. And there's two parts to that, right? But the first question I'll ask about that is, some people are wanting to hire back employees. Maybe they got the PPP loan, or they just want to get back to work.
Mhm.
And employees maybe aren't wanting to come back. Maybe they make more in unemployment, or maybe they're scared, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they're actually scared and worried about getting the virus, transmitting the virus, any of that. What, from a legal perspective, tell us your thoughts on how to handle as an employer. That's obviously a tough situation. What are kind of the legal ramifications of all of that?
Yeah. So this, like I was saying, this is brand new territory for everyone involved. And so what attorneys are doing and what I'm doing is sort of relying on the existing um, framework for safety in the workplace. And so there's a couple federal laws that come into play here, but mainly it's OSHA, right? The Occupational Health and Safety Act. So, and the legal themes that I'm focusing on are that of negligence. So the analogy that I like to use is, if you have a brick and mortar space and people are coming back on, both employees and, at some point in the next month or weeks, employees or customers rather, you want to be able, you are obligated to create a safe working environment. Okay. So if you are a hairdresser and there's a big slippery puddle of gel or mousse or shampoo on the floor and you don't take care of it, and someone slips on it, well, then what's triggered is a negligence claim. You, as the business owner, should have known better that there was, shampoo on the floor and you should have cleaned it up. So that idea of just being negligent as a business owner is really the legal theme that we're working with here. And so with COVID, what I'm recommending is keep those same things in mind with creating a safe workspace. So if your folks need protective equipment, make sure that that's available to them. If people need to stay 6 feet apart, make sure that you can accommodate and retrofit your workplace if possible. Um, it, you know, the EEOC now says that taking temperatures of employees before they come back to work is okay. So if that works for you, then that's okay too. But what I'm encouraging employers to do is really set up a set of policies that are in compliance with your state government mandates as to how and when and what phase you fall into, and follow those, develop policies to keep those in place, document those policies so that if anyone ever comes back to say, oh, this is where I got COVID, you're liable, you can say, these are our processes, this is how we did them, these are the temperature checks. And then also too, what we're seeing is waivers. Employers saying to people coming on the property, just like if you're going to a YMCA or a gym or a bounce house or anything like that, you coming onto the property has a certain amount of risk, and you waive your right to sue us if you contract COVID. Now, are courts holding that up? We don't know yet because it's brand new territory, but I see a lot of businesses doing that, and I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's kind of smart.
There's a lot of stuff in there that I want to jump into, because I think so the question I think a lot of people would have in their minds is, okay, I need to take measures to make sure that I'm not considered to be negligent.
Mm-hmm.
Are there guidelines for that? Is it state specific? I know states have their own sort of guidelines for reopening and maybe recommendations. Is that what they're going to go by? As long as you do those things, that you're okay? Or is it kind of more fluid than that?
I think definitely if there's a problem that comes up, a court is going to look to see what state you're in, what phase of reopening you fell under, and whether or not you were following those guidelines. If you're doing all of that and you're keeping on top of it and really on top of it, you're going to be able to defend a negligence claim should someone bring it up. And I always say this to my clients, and I hate to say it, but you can't prevent people from suing you. What you can do, because people will sue you for any reason, but what you can do is put yourself in the best position to defend it should litigation ensue. So having written policies in place, following those policies, making sure you're following state government guidelines as to, what phase you fall under, keeping things clean, taking temperatures, all of that total picture will help with that. And just think of it as any other kind of premises liability issue, that if there's ice on your sidewalk and the sidewalk falls, under your responsibility, you have to take care of the ice. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you open yourself up for exposure. So,
Yeah, and I think this is a good comment. Somebody said that how could someone even prove that COVID was acquired? I mean, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a difficult thing to actually prove. Now,
Yeah.
I can see, issues where if certain people, like if a lot of people got it and they trace it back, I don't know how that's going to be working, right? With, tracing these cases back, that potentially, but again, as long as you're taking like basically a good faith effort to, make sure your place is clean, make sure you're not stacking people in right next to each other, right? Like don't force people in close contact with one another, wear protective gear, take those steps. And then I love what you said, Amy, about documenting, because I always, that's my big thing. People ask me questions all the time about, can I do this? Can I do it from a finance and tax perspective? And the big thing is I'm like, document why, right? Like there's a lot of gray area, even in when you're talking about can this be a deductible tax expense? There's a lot of gray area there. And a lot of that can be fixed by documenting your reasoning well.
Yep.
Right. If you don't have the documentation, if you can't say, here are the steps that I took,
yes.
Then if something does happen down the line, in my case, if you get audited, in your case, if you get sued, right, you want to be able to say, here's this like whole list of the things that I did.
Yes.
To back up the fact that I shouldn't be held negligent here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I tell people too, it doesn't have to be anything formal. It doesn't have to be written in Latin. It could be, if you want to collect someone's statement, it could be handwritten. That's fine. But what you want to do is you want to be able to record your story in real time, right? They call it contemporaneous recordings. So in real time, so you write it down when it's happening. Because what happens with litigation, and like I said, I agree with the question. I think it's going to be very hard to say, oh, for sure, I got it by going to this nail salon. So I think that makes it even more difficult than a slip and fall in front of your store. But what happens is then 2 years later for litigation, you have to be able to take your documents, and that document has to tell the story. And that's what's going to help you 2 years later. So, I really, as simple as a journal or anything that you do that shows your story in real time, keep track of it and write it down.
Write it down, take pictures, that's always good documentary evidence in these kind of situations. So somebody's asking about, wouldn't having someone sign a waiver put more doubt in a customer's mind, in essence, creating more liability? I have some thoughts, but I want to send this over to you first, Amy. What do you think about that?
So having a waiver wouldn't create more liability. The liability is going to be there regardless of what the waiver says. And I agree with that. And there have been a lot of people that said, well, I don't want people to think that I have a workplace that isn't safe or a retail establishment that isn't safe. But at the same time, you take your kids to a bounce house, a trampoline park, the YMCA, indoor skydiving, anything you do is going to require a waiver. And at a minimum, I think it at least puts people on notice, their customers, the people that are entering in your premises, that they are assuming a certain level of risk by coming in. And I think people know that. And I don't think it needs to be overly stated. I'm not talking about a 10-page waiver, but just something to say like, hey, we all know what's out there. The risks. We've taken steps to minimize those risks, but it's possible.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, if you don't have a waiver, I think that's okay too, in the sense that I don't think that a waiver is necessarily a deal breaker. And for example, and I know I have clients that are hairdressers and own salons. When I go to my hairdresser, if my hairdresser dyes my hair or highlights my hair or puts a product in my hair that I have a reaction to, well, I've assumed a certain risk of coming onto the premises, and he's acting or she's acting within the proper scope of business, taking a duty of care to use products that other people use. If I happen to get a reaction, I've sort of assumed that risk. And so that's going to be the case with COVID as well. People coming onto any premises are going to assume a certain amount of risk. And so, like I said, it's not a deal breaker. And in your individual circumstance, it may work. And if it doesn't, that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And this is a good question too. So, mental health therapist, and would love to know what to include in a waiver. Do I also need to include how we would have disclosed client information if we learn that someone has COVID? So, if somebody came in, do you have a obligation to tell other people, firstly? And then do you have, I know you offer templates, so we can talk about that a little bit at the end. I don't know if you have a waiver template that people could get from you.
Yeah,
You can talk
absolutely.
about that too.
Yeah, we have a template waiver that people can get, just if they want to start working from something, and if they want to, have it individually tweaked, we can do that as well. What I think the question is do you have to tell people that someone has been tested positive for COVID? And the answer to that is yes, there is an obligation for the employer to do that, subtracting any personal health information. So again, now we're talking about HIPAA compliance. Personal health information has to be protected. But then this goes back to the negligence piece. As an employer, if someone is working for you that has tested positive for an extremely contagious virus, it is your duty and obligation to tell other staff members. You don't have to give the name, and you shouldn't give the name, because then you violate privacy laws. But again, if I think it's a smart thing to do, and it's just the right thing to do. To put people on notice that, hey, you may have been exposed. Keep this in mind when you're going home, or you're going to visit your grandparents, or So yeah.
And I imagine that's within reason, right? Like, if you subsequently find out an employee has COVID, do you have to go back and somehow track down the last 2 weeks worth of customers you've had to tell them that, oh, by the way, you might have been exposed to COVID, over that time period? Which, I'm thinking about a restaurant here, like that's not going to be feasible. But maybe in a situation like you're in a salon and you could feasibly contact those people, are you required to do that? Or is that,
So I think this is going to be interesting. Really, and we were talking about this before we got on the call, what exactly the obligations for contact tracing will be. And I'm not really sure, quite frankly, what that exactly means. I think it, generally speaking, it means, hey, I know someone who tested positive. If you have been exposed to them in the past 2 weeks, keep in mind that you might have antibodies, you might be getting, sick, and just keep track of that. Whether or not there's an obligation, I don't know the answer to that. I would have to do more research, and I think we'll get some guidance more on contact tracing. But I don't think it would be a bad I don't think it would be a bad idea. But let's think about that. I don't want to say a for sure yes or no.
Yeah, it looks like that's something on people's minds, right? That they're worried about contact tracing and what that means. Like, I know, I think even for places like even for churches, right? That finally, when they are allowed to come back, if there's like an outbreak traced back to a church, like, is there a legal liability there? I think it's on a lot of people's minds. And I think, we don't exactly know, but again, as long as you're taking precautions, that's the best thing that you can do, right?
And this is just me analyzing it from a legal perspective, because we had a church in our area, a very large church, that someone did test positive for. They closed down the church, but there was some member of administrative staff still coming onto the property. And they did not tell anybody that someone in the staff had tested positive for COVID. And so, number one, I think legally that could possibly then open you up for a negligence charge, to the extent that as an employer, you knew someone tested positive, yet you still continued to have people come on your premises. I mean, let's make that akin to a gas leak, right? Or a carbon monoxide leak. I mean, knowing that you had that would require you, as a premises owner, to provide guidance and warnings and information. So I think legally there's a pretty big piece of it, but then also too, just from a publicity, optics, business practice stance, I think it's a good idea anyway, right? You're telling your community members, I'm being safe, I'm being overly cautious, I'm not going to tell you who it is,
Yeah.
or what their status is, but I think it's a good practice.
Yeah, and I can see this. I'm just thinking about this from a business perspective, right? Of you open up your business, all of a sudden employee contracts it. Then you're sitting here like, do I need to close my business down now?
Mhm.
Or do I just need to clean this? Do I need to tell every customer that walks in after the fact, after I found out that this happened? I can just see this as being a really interesting, and again, we have to see how all of this plays out. The best thing that you can do as a business owner is just to continue to make the best decisions and protect, have those processes in place and document it. But it is going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out in actuality,
And
right?
it's very tough. I mean, brick and mortar people are in a tough spot, because if those doors aren't open and those people aren't coming in for appointments, you're not making money. And I get that. Um, so I know there's a sort of, that tug and pull there. But what I guess I'm trying to tell clients is, if you think about sort of the shorter term sacrifices in the long run, when this is over, what your customers are going to remember is that you went above and beyond to keep them safe. And I
Yeah.
think that's going to be the lasting memory of it, as opposed to another 4 weeks of being closed, or another
Yeah.
2 weeks being closed. Again, tough situation. And I
Yeah.
don't blame people that are chomping at the bit to reopen. I really don't.
Yeah. It's a tough place to be sitting
Yeah.
in any
Yeah.
way. Somebody's asking, can you require customers to wear masks when coming into your business?
Yeah. So I think that you can. I think that you can ask them. The question whether or not you can force them, not force them, but if they choose not to, ask them to leave the premises. Again, I'm not sure what the answer to that question is.
Yeah.
I would have to.
I mean, I could see thinking about it from the standpoint of no shirt, no shoes, no service,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's your place of business.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I
It's
wouldn't call
private
that
property.
discriminatory, right? Like
No.
in my head, that seems similar to like, okay, you can't wander in here, in the nude. You can't
Yeah.
wander in, like that's not safe for other people.
Yeah.
I would think you could. Now, could people sue you? Yeah. Would it get far, to your point, right? You can't stop people from suing you, but you can put yourself in a place where it wouldn't actually go anywhere, right?
Yes, yeah. And then the only other thing there, I would think that if you're going to require people coming on the property to wear them, would there be any obligation to supply them?
Mm,
Maybe that probably would come up if people come onto the property and say, I don't have them, will you supply them?
yeah.
That, again, that would probably be the best case scenario. But yeah, I mean, JetBlue just is now requiring all passengers to wear them. So I
Yeah.
think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, to me that would be fair. Honestly, I would appreciate, as a customer, I would appreciate if you said you have to do this to come
Hmm.
in here, because that means everybody before me had to do it too.
Yep.
And so I would be thinking, okay, this seems like it would be a safer place. I'm gonna have to get my hair done at some point. At some
No,
point,
I
this is
know.
a
I
problem right
know.
now. And I'm just
That's
playing
why I have my
chicken
hair
with
up.
how long I can wait. But I hope when I go back, I hope they meet me at the door. I hope before I even come in, they're like, here's the list of things we're doing
Yes.
to make you feel better
Yes.
about, this appointment and whether you still want to do it.
Yes.
Here's how we're cleaning things. Here are the what we're doing. And I hope when I get there, they'll meet me at the door.
Yes.
I don't have to touch anything to get in the door. I hope it's
Yes.
open for me. I hope they're all wearing gloves and masks and they hand me one,
Yes.
like that to me, I would be like, okay,
Yep.
I
Yep.
hope that I see the cleaners out everywhere, like
Yes.
wiping everything down. I want to see that as a
Yeah.
customer. That doesn't make me disconcerted. That makes me feel better
I agree.
about what I'm doing.
I agree. Or even where places like Costco or other big box stores have now started having people wait outside in line, and now
Yeah.
they're only opening every other register. I mean, you want to see that. I mean, every place that either my husband or I go into that's not like that causes us more concern. So I
Mhm.
think as a reasonable person, you would feel safe. This, situation has pulled back the curtain about how many unreasonable people there are out there with this, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I think that's a good policy.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going back to one. on that I just missed. So plumbing company and sending plumbers into people's houses, legal risks for that, and ways to protect company and employees.
So again, I would probably apply any rules that you would give your employees, or any directions or policies when going into a customer's home for any other reason. Okay. So, again, masks, booties, plastic gloves. What are some of the other risks besides COVID that a plumber would have going onto someone else's property? How do you otherwise protect your employee? So protect them in the same way with COVID.
Yeah.
Protective equipment, asking people on the property to stay 6 feet away, if they're not giving those employees the right to, leave if they feel unsafe in any way. So,
okay. So going back to, we talked about, okay, this is what you need to do. You need to be able to provide a workplace for people, for employers and for customers alike, that is, essentially clearly making sure you have put parameters. You're not just going back to business as usual, right? That's a requirement for you have as an employer to make sure you're covering your bases. If an employee still won't come back to work, how does that work?
This is hard, and I've been getting this question a lot. And this question of, my boss wants to reopen, he wants to bring me back to work, and I don't feel it's safe. And can I qualify for unemployment afterwards?
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I'm saying no, you can't. That you really have to go back to work. Most states are what we call at-will employment, which means that the employer can terminate you for any reason, so long as it's not discriminatory. So saying that you don't believe that the workplace is safe, could you file an OSHA complaint? Absolutely. Could you file a discrimination complaint because you told them that you had an underlying health condition that might be exacerbated by COVID? Sure, you could, but again, we're talking about compensation way down the line, as if it's just any other piece of litigation. And with unemployment, as here it is in Illinois, and I would assume for most states, is if you voluntarily leave, you can't get unemployment compensation. So it's a very tough spot. What I've recommended to people is, on a case by case basis, do your best to negotiate work from home if possible. If you're part of a union, that's certainly completely a different scenario. But if you're an at-will employer, or employee rather, just know that, you can be terminated without any recourse,
Yeah.
So.
And I think that this is going to be a really hard one for employers, especially because they're trying to incent, we've got all these programs they're putting out there to try to incent people to hire back people. Yet now we also have programs that make it lucrative to be on unemployment, at least through the end of July, when that extra $600 goes through. And I do think some people are legitimately worried, right? And so in some cases it might be fair, because in some cases maybe they have an underlying health condition, like you said, or maybe they're living with someone that does. So it's a hard thing to figure out legally. In general, typically, if somebody declines to come back to work, right, they would not be eligible for unemployment.
Right.
It's going to be interesting, because I think there are some mixed messages, though, coming out from different states even about this and how this is going to work. So I would assume, like, overall, more than likely, they shouldn't be collecting unemployment.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with all of this, though, and if there's going to be, I don't know. It's yet to be seen how this plays out, because this is new, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've never been in a situation where just the fear of, like, being in the world is the worry. It's, normally it's like, okay, an employer has control over their space, and as long as they're taking precautions. But if somebody's just worried about being in the world, which, hey, we're coming off of, maybe not even yet, but we've been working on all this social distancing and how important that is. And that's been drilled into our brains. And now, people are saying, you got to come back to work. I can understand where some people might feel uncomfortable, So I am curious to see how this plays out in general. I don't believe there's a requirement right now. Let me know if you know differently, to report employees who don't come back, though. I know typically you're supposed to do that. I think I have heard that it's not required that you as an employer, you can, of course, right? You can tell people, hey, you can report that person. But right now it is not a requirement. And right now, people claiming unemployment under you also won't impact your long-term insurance rates. That's what they've said under the CARES Act. So just keeping all of that in mind when trying to make decisions.
Yeah.
In some cases, I can see it being better than fighting with employees and forcing them back to work when they really are truly worried. Different story if they're just trying to collect unemployment, but if they're truly worried, go hire. You can use PPP and go hire somebody else, right? Like that is a completely acceptable thing to do. It doesn't have to be the same employees. So I think that's just that employer-employee relationship. This is going to be an interesting thing to see how all of that plays out, right?
Yeah, and I tell people do a cost benefit analysis with your own individual circumstance. Risk and reward. Because I don't want to tell people, oh, absolutely, if you feel like you're scared, don't come into the workplace. Well, then you wind up in a position where you're not making any money or collecting unemployment, and you've lost your job. Does that outweigh, or is that more of a benefit than avoiding what you think you might contract going to work, but then going to the grocery store and standing in line? It's tough. It's a tough situation.
It is. It really, really is. This is a question from Kevin from a while ago. You can't see us. We have to we're a court reporting firm. Witnesses come to offices. So would it be recommended to do temperature checks since it's important for us to understand exactly what they're saying? We typically need to see their mouth. So should we ask for a disclaimer to have them remove their mask and keep them 6 feet? I think I would guess, this just goes back to put in, your best efforts to make it safe, right? So if you need to see their mouth and you can't do a mask, make sure there's a good amount of distance, right?
And being an attorney and who sat at, depositions, most of the time the conference rooms allow for that. Where you can create 6 feet apart. So I would say yes. And again, temperature checking is okay. And, eventually we will all have to, no matter what state you're in and what phase you're going to be in, we're all going to have to sort of, come up with processes for people to get back to work.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions similar to this, right? Like, can I do these things? Can I require these things? Can I require thermometer checks on clients? Can we have a document to sign for clients knowing that disinfection precautions are taken? And I think that's what they're saying with a waiver. Yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah. You can have them sign that waiver. Now, if you have them, I would guess, right? Like I'm just seeing how this will play out, and this will be interesting to see how all of this plays out. But I would guess if you have them sign a waiver, but you take absolutely zero precautions, that waiver is probably not going to fully protect you, right? So don't use a waiver in lieu of making those changes to make sure that it's a safe environment, right?
It's the whole package. And remember, when you're in litigation 2 years from now, you have to tell your story in documents.
Yes.
So the waiver is just one extra tool that you have, but it's got to be a total package.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So I'm going to switch gears real quick because I know we have some other things to talk about and we're already half an hour in. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I know a couple of other things. And if we didn't get to your question, we can look back at these later and maybe Amy can put in some answers if we didn't answer them. But let's talk real quick about contracts because I think that's another question people are having right now around contracts, whether they're commercial lease agreements, whether they are other contracts that they have for their business. What does COVID do to contracts?
Yeah. So as an initial comment, I want to say to every single person that is listening, put something in writing for all of your agreements. I don't care if you're hiring a vendor. I don't care if you're hiring an independent contractor, service agreements, products. Please put something in writing. Because what happens is when you call me and tell me, well, I gave them $10,000 and they didn't give me what I thought I was going to get, what recourse do I have? You have to take the document, go to court and say, this was a breach of the contract. If there's no contract, you're very, very limited. So even if you write it yourself and it includes nothing more than the name of the parties and your understanding of the agreement between the two people, sign and date, just have something, right? Just so that's my initial point with contracts. Please have something in writing. The second piece, what we're seeing now in contracts is I'm no longer able to perform the services due to COVID. How can I get out of it? Am I excused from performance? Am I on the hook? Am I liable? Again, brand new area of law. So what we call act of God or force majeure clauses and contracts is honestly, quite frankly, it's silly, but has been very much sort of boilerplate language that attorneys put in because it's necessary. And in my 20 years of practice, I really haven't ever had to rely on them. Until now. So what that does is it provides an opportunity to say to either party, should there be a completely unforeseen circumstance, fire, earthquake, flood, act of terrorism, something that I could not have imagined that prohibits me from performing the contract, I will be excused. Okay. And so, those are important as ever now. Again, we take the contract, we write the best language we can for that force majeure. I am now including epidemics and pandemics in that list of enumerated force majeure examples for which you can be excused from. Again, if litigation ensues, you have to go, to take it to a court and see whether or not the judge agrees with you, whether or not your language really excuses that. But I think I certainly think there's an argument that this was unforeseen. So let's put all of the language in there that says, here are the reasons why I would be excused from performance. And then what happens then? And someone asked this on Facebook, what happens then? How do we terminate the contract? Do we pause the contract? How do we give each other notice? What if I could just partially perform? So we just put some language in there that provides for those mechanisms should you ever have to engage the force majeure clause.
And what happens if you didn't do that? If you're sitting in a space where you're like, well, I have these contracts and I don't have anything written into them for this. Is there anything that you could do at this point? Or are you, pretty much bound by that contract?
Well, gosh, I mean, I am dealing with this with, people who were going to be part of South by Southwest, and Austin canceled it. And this was kind of early on when this was all brand new. And now people are threatening litigation because you signed the contract and you owe me. Certainly you're seeing this with VRBO. I'm outside of my window of cancellation. Can I get this money back? So a couple different things there, and it depends on the type of contract. I don't think you're out of luck. I would say first, diplomacy before war. So I would try to negotiate with the person. Listen, everybody understands what's going on here. This is happening to everyone. This is not just a circumstance that's unique to me. What can we do? And if it's two business people that are looking to resolve the issue, I would certainly hope that people are understandable. And courts are closed. So if someone's threatening litigation, it's going to be a little while before they can file the complaint anyway. But I would just say, try your best to work it out as best you can.
I love, that is a great quote, the diplomacy before war. I think that applies to so many things right now, right? Mm-hmm. Because I'm getting a lot of people, even in issues with your employees, right? Explain where you're at. You know what I mean? I think if things go bad when it becomes a situation where you go to war first, right? Yes. You don't want that to be the case. That should be last resort.
Yes.
In all of this,
yes.
Right? We need to all be understanding that this is new.
Yeah.
And everybody's trying to do their best and everybody's trying to figure it out.
Yes.
And be real with that, right?
Yes.
I think that diplomacy, work with people as best you can to find a solution that works for everybody, or works at least partially for everybody,
yes.
right?
Yes.
That's going to be the best course in so many of these things.
Yes.
is just to try to work it out. And that'll also limit your legal liability on the back end, I would imagine. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's another phrase out there that's, by the time you get to litigation, the only people that have really won are the attorneys. Litigation is so expensive, especially for small businesses. It's extremely cost prohibitive. So it's way cheaper to try to, work it out beforehand and solve the problems.
Yep. Okay, so somebody's asking, what about contracts to perform, so hospitality events, when the event makes it unsafe? I think we kind of talked about this due to numbers in attendance. So I think that these are contracts written pre-COVID they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a case-by-case scenario where, I've put down a security deposit for a wedding and now the wedding's canceled and I can't get it back. Again, work with the individual vendor to see if you can get an alternative date in the same general time frame. If the vendor gives you another slot in the month of June in 2021, is that something reasonable? Can he give you half the money back? Can he give you all the money back over the course of 6 months? Again, just try to negotiate something and then get that in writing, because that's a settlement agreement then. And then if he breaches this, I always say he, I mean he or she, but
it's always a he.
It's like the bad guy.
Here. We can these are mostly women. I know we have a couple men in here, but these are mostly women. We can say he. It's fine.
It's like the bad guy. He's always the bad guy.
Yeah.
And then get that settlement agreement in writing so that if that's breached, then you can go to court and get that enforced as well. So
yeah, that's great. Okay, so commercial lease agreements.
Yeah.
If you're in a spot, I know a lot of business owners that are in a spot where they're like, I have been closed for 2 months. I don't know when I'm going to be able to reopen. I still have to pay this lease.
Yes.
I have no revenue to pay this lease. What are my options?
So what I'm suggesting, recommending to people, and what I think is an entirely reasonable option, is a couple of things. The landlord agrees to tack on a couple months at the end of the lease. That's really the best case scenario. Some landlords have agreed to, waive rent outright, and that's fantastic. But they have to pay their taxes too. They have to pay on the property. And then other landlords I've seen has said, okay, well, I'll give you a pass for these 2 months, but then the lump sum will be due 3 months from now. Again, though, it goes back to negotiation with your landlord for individual rent. If the landlord doesn't work with you, check your local states. And then this is residential, so I don't know how much it applies to commercial, but check your local states to make sure, like in Illinois, for example, they can't evict anybody, at least from a residential perspective, for a certain amount of time. See if that applies in your state as well. And work with your landlord. Again, if he sues you for back rent at the end of your lease, can he? Yeah. I mean, you could sue anyone for any reason, and you have to defend it. So just try to negotiate. And before you sign a lease right now, let's definitely take a look at that. Don't get yourself into a 10-year lease right now.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't be signing a lease right now. I don't know.
Yeah. Or if you do, let's realize that it's a buyer's market, and put in as many protective clauses for you before you go in. So
yes. Yeah. 100%. So somebody's asking about non-compete agreements. I don't know if that means whether they're in force. Any ideas on if you want to, whoever asked this, if you want to expand on that, but any thoughts on how any of this impacts non-compete agreements?
So I'm just generally speaking, as for people who are tuning in and listening, non-compete agreements basically is an agreement between the employee and the employer, where the employee says, hey, by employing you, you're going to have access to some private, confidential, proprietary information. When you leave my employment, you can't go and share that information with other people. And I'm going to ask you not to work in this industry for 6 months within a 15-mile radius. Again, non-competes are very, very circumstance specific. Courts tend to not like them that much because they restrict people's employment. As COVID applies, my guess is that COVID would not impact your non-compete agreement in any particular way. If the non-compete agreement is overbroad in scope to begin with, it's going to be overbroad in scope anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to what we were just talking about, any additional verbiage in the process of negotiating a lease renewal? I think that was what Amy was just talking about, where if you're negotiating a renewal, try to get as many clauses in there that are preferential to you as you can, right?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I would be very wary of signing a 10-year lease for anything. The shorter the lease, the better, with the option to renew. I mean, I know landlords want to lock you in for a long time, but man, I've never seen anything good come from a 10-year lease. Another thing I want to do is, personal guarantees isn't necessarily COVID related, but if the landlord is asking for a personal guarantee, that's pretty typical. But let's see if we can cap that at a certain amount, or a certain time frame, so that they can't go after you personally for the amount of the lease agreement. Um, Business disruption and the pandemic, that would be new language that I would want to see. What's going to be your plan going forward, landlord, if we have to shut down, and what does that mean for rent? And are you going to waive the rent? Are you going to tack it on to the end of the lease?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's always, you have to go through the bad situations to then write the better contracts. But
yeah, that's definitely true. Like, contract rating
learning.
after COVID is probably going to be very different than it
Yeah.
was before it, right?
Yeah.
Because until you've been in a situation, again, like, I think most people, this would be an unforeseen situation.
Absolutely.
So Suzanne is asking, I'm assuming you're a photographer, Suzanne, just can you, certain phases, can you photograph small groups of people? Again, there's no like legal, as long as you are following the general guidelines of your state, it sounds like, right? And as long as you are putting proper precautions in place, then yes, that might be a situation though too where a waiver would be useful, right? Where you're just saying, okay, I'm happy to take your picture, but if you think you got COVID from me somehow because of this, we have this waiver to prove.
Just like any mitigation of risk, if you have people that are coming to your studio, or if you have people coming to your home, or you're going into someone else's home, or you're taking it outside, all of the same precautions to limit your liability are going to be the same for COVID. And what I would for sure say is, make sure you follow your state guidelines as to what phase you fall in. And the states are very clear as to whether photographers are in this phase, or chiropractors are in this phase, or what now is an essential business.
Yeah, and Suzanne's asking about the language to put in that. I assume you mean the waiver, Suzanne, and that's something I think Amy does have some waiver templates, but I assume it's just something along the lines of here's another example of a letter. Well, that's landlord, but something along the lines of, you're accepting responsibility for XYZ, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You can't sue me if you get COVID and think I gave it to you, kind of thing.
Exactly. And the thing is, I think it's going to be very hard to prove in litigation that you got COVID from this particular, especially with the evidence, the fact that it's asymptomatic, and that the gestation period is 14 days. But again, it doesn't stop people from suing. Put yourself in the best position to defend.
Yeah.
And
I think just don't be negligent, right?
Yeah.
Like,
don't be negligent.
Don't ignore this and close your eyes and say, I'm just going to reopen exactly as I always did.
Yes.
And I'm going to pack people in next to each other, and I'm going to, not put any additional procedures in place. Like, just don't do that, right? Make sure you're put in that good faith effort to make sure you're providing that safe workplace for people. And that is what will help you.
And if you're worried at all, try to focus less on, is this legal? Is this not legal? Try to focus less on this and think to yourself, what makes the most sense? And as business owners, you're going to know your individual industry, your clients, your customers, how you deliver service or products, and just use your common sense, as opposed to worrying too much about the legalities. And most people will find the right answer.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. When a city shuts down services that the states say are okay, what is the jurisdiction? Many states say the state rules, but many mayors are making their own rules. I imagine you're under force for whatever, state and local rules, right?
Yeah.
Like the guidelines. Now it is confusing. I mean,
Yeah.
because in some cases you're getting very different reactions from a local government than you are from a state government, and that does make it difficult.
There's a lot of noise out there too
There's
between
a lot of noise.
what the government is saying and then what the individual mayors are saying. But the individual mayors within a state have to follow the state guidelines. If mayors decide that they want to do something different, know that once you open your business based on what the mayor says, you can be shut down.
Yeah.
The state can come in and shut you down. So,
Yeah.
not worth it.
Yeah. So I think in that case, I would imagine, right? Like, I think what's happening, sometimes states are taking a more broad, like you can open, but then it's usually like the local ones that are maybe being more conservative with it. That's usually what we're seeing. Now, in some cases, it may be the opposite where, but I think in that case, if it's the opposite, if your states say you can't open and your local government says you can, that's going to be the state, right? That's going to really dictate that.
Yeah. And also too, if your mayor is saying go ahead and open, but the state is not, I think you're opening yourself up to liability.
Yeah.
Because you're not following state guidelines now. So I would be cautious of that. I mean, there are people all across the board with this, and I don't want to be like tough love about this, but I mean, I'm just telling people, like, we're going to get through this. Things are going to open back up. It's going to come in phases. Do the best you can to mitigate your liability, because at the end of the day, the extra money that you might make opening 2 weeks earlier is going to be nothing compared to defending litigation or dealing with client loss. So, it's not easy, but just, try to be patient and ask me questions if you need to. We can figure it out on an individual basis.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about where people can find you. I've got a lot of people asking, like, where can we find waiver templates and where can we find different things? So tell us where people can find you. I can also post the link to all of your template shop, which you have I'm assuming, I don't know if you have the waiver one out there, but I know you have other ones if you're trying to set up an LLC, or if you're, there's a lot of different templates out there that Amy has that you can purchase. So I will drop that link, but tell them where all they can find you and everything that you guys provide. Because you also do services as well, not just templates.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can see, my little sign here, legal in a box, that was my concept. When I opened up my practice, I realized that so many small business owners, the entrepreneurs, micro businesses, startups, just were priced out of the legal market. And, they were getting into a lot of trouble when, just being able to call up an attorney and ask a couple of questions would have saved them a lot of money and time and headache. So I came up with this concept of, what if we made it approachable and transparent and compact and priced right? And so that's where the concept of Legal in a Box came up. So you can find me at legalinabox.com. That is a place that is just like flat fee, DIY forms and LLC setups. And, all the pricing there is transparent. If you're an existing business and want to have sort of a retainer ongoing relationship with me, we also offer a subscription services, amytepperlaw.com. And I can post information about that as well. But honestly, I have no problem with people reaching out to me through Facebook, and I get a lot of leads and a lot of clients that way, because I think it's sort of a nice, easy way to connect with me. So please feel free to message me directly, either at Legal in a Box, AMT Law, or Amy Poland Tepper.
Yeah. Okay. I will post all of Amy's. I'll do a whole post with all of Amy's contact information and all of that so that you guys can get it, and with the links that you need. So don't worry, you can get in touch with her. But I think the service you're providing is so useful to people, because I do think you're exactly right? Like oftentimes legal, I mean, they're not too dissimilar from CPAs, right? We kind of seem like we're expensive. We are, sometimes it seems like, specifically for legal, I think even it's only available to like those bigger businesses. And you and I are similar. And that was one of the things we first connected on, which is, no, these services, this information, this help needs to get to smaller businesses. It needs to get to solopreneurs. It needs to get to all of those people that need to have it, where it can protect them and help them.
Exactly.
But right now, it's hard to find, lawyers that are really going to serve a market and serve it well. So that was one of the things I know we really connected on. So I appreciate everything that you are doing. And I think that there's a lot of people in this group that can really benefit from having a lawyer, right?
Yeah.
Basically you can, and then you can just, if you get one of Amy's subscription services, you can just, say, well, let me talk to my lawyer. Who doesn't want to say that?
Well, that's exactly what my tagline is that
Yeah, that's
I
right.
felt
I think that's where I saw
like
it.
every business, regardless of its size, should be able to say, let me speak to my attorney without
Yeah.
having to mortgage your house to do it,
Uh-huh.
and this
Yep.
also empowers people who are, having lifestyle businesses, work from home situations,
Mhm.
moms who want to, get back in the workforce. They have to have the guidance too. And so that's really the niche that I work in.
I love that. You and I are very similar in that way, in who we serve and why we
Hmm.
serve.
Hmm.
Okay, guys. Well, I'm going to let you go. We're actually under an hour. Yay! It's been a while since I've done one under an hour, but I really appreciate you coming on here, Amy. Amy reached out to me and said, "Hey, I can come on and answer these questions," and I was like, "Yes, please help me because I'm doing my best." But hashtag not a lawyer. So I need to start using that every time I like half answer a legal question.
Yes.
And I think I think we should have done a count on how many times we said it depends, because I
Yeah.
think it wasn't that bad. I mean,
I know.
usually
I
a
said it.
CPA and a lawyer, that's what we love. It
Yes.
depends.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
think we did a pretty good job there. So
Yes. Yeah. I think we did.
But guys, it depends. Okay. Just FYI. Okay. So I am going to post all of that and you guys can reach out to her and hopefully this was helpful. And if you have more questions, keep posting them because Amy can come back and look at this thread and answer them, tag her in it.
Mhm.
And she'll be able to see your questions. So thanks for joining us, guys. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.